My name is Sid Moen. I serve as co-director of Interfaith Action of Southwest Michigan. And we're delighted to present this, our third annual program around faith and pride, a series that we launched more than 3 years ago to look at LGBTQ participation in faith communities here in Southwest Michigan. This year, our focus is on LGBTQ clergy who are serving faith communities in Southwest Michigan. We are gifted this year in having 4 open gay men who are serving in leadership within faith communities, the largest number of open LGBTQ people involved in engaged faith communities here with Interfaith Action. As I referenced that all 4 of these open LGBTQ people are gay men. And to provide some gender perspective, we've invited a neighbor and colleague, Jen Adams, who has had a long service of ministry in the city of Holland. So let me provide a quick introduction, moving from north to south in our 5-county jurisdiction. Again, Jen Adams, serving as Episcopal priest in the city of Holland. Then moving to Saugatuck, Jay Johnson, serving as Episcopal priest in Saugatuck. Then just south of Jim is Sal Sapienza, serving as a UCC clergy person in Douglas. Then Jim Steen, serving as Episcopal priest in South Haven. And then in our southernmost part of our geographic area is Christopher Mergener, serving as a Presbyterian minister in Niles. So let's jump in and get started. Each one of you are engaged in ministry in an area of Michigan that is primarily rural, leans to be conservative, is not known for having inclusive policies that are welcoming or protecting of LGBTQ individuals. So as open LGBTQ religious leaders, that can present challenges, and I'm sure also presents experiences of delight. So let me start with the 2 of you who serve the largest municipalities in our area, from Holland in the north to Niles in the south. And Jen, you bring long tenured experience in working in this area. And Christopher, you are relatively new to this area, having relocated to Southwest Michigan and serving in the city of Niles. And now Niles and Holland, both known to be somewhat conservative municipalities. So share with us your experiences. What were your delights in arriving here? And what were your challenges in engaging in ministry in this part of Michigan? Jen, we'll turn to you as the longest tenured person from the big cities in our region.
Right. I'm glad to, first of all, that you had to go to Holland for diversity is something to note. I don't think that has happened before, so I'm kind of still excited about that you had to come to Holland to make this a more diverse group of folks. So. So I arrived in 1994 which was a different kind of day everywhere in terms of LGBTQ folks. I did drive across the country from Berkeley, California, which I was at Graduate Theological Union there. And so that was the biggest move that I've ever made, from Berkeley to Holland, and probably the biggest move I ever will. I'll note that Jay Johnson drove across the country with me and helped deliver me here. So
that's my fault.
It's Jay's fault. And we go back that far. I'm glad for that. I'm glad you're here. I had to go pick him up almost 30 years later and bring him back. I did wonder upon arrival what I had done, and if this could be a place that I could live and thrive. At the time, I wasn't fully out. I was still working that out myself. I was 25 when I arrived. And again, there weren't as many opportunities as there are now for young people, or awareness as for young people. And it was even more conservative, believe it or not, than it is now, or differently so. Grace has been, throughout the entirety of my experience here, extremely welcoming, not only welcoming to me, but also encouraging and supportive of my being as whole as I could be as a human being, and the ministry that I'm doing as well. I apologize for a little background noise here. I don't know if you can hear that. Delights have to do with the people and the work that we're able to do together here. Besides Grace becoming open and inclusive over time, has been the work that we've done in the city of Holland with regard to a non-discrimination ordinance, which is one of the most comprehensive in the state. So the work has been both, or I guess all, internal for me in my own work of being who I need to be in many different ways, in walking with the congregation to the point of being genuinely inclusive, and also helping to launch some groups and movements in the larger community that have had an impact here too. It's not without challenges. It's not without at times threats that either my spouse Beth or I received. It's not without a sense that there is significant resistance still to the LGBTQ community, but the delights have outweighed the challenges enough that we call this place home, and overall, I'm grateful for that.
Great. Well, moving from someone who relocated from the West Coast here to Southwest Michigan several decades ago, let's turn to Christopher, who relocated from the East Coast to Southwest Michigan just 2 to 3 years ago, right, Christopher?
Actually, it was in December of 2020 that I came here. So right in the middle of the pandemic. And so my ministry started virtually with people. I didn't actually meet the congregation until June. I had met some of the leaders through Zoom, like in meetings and things like that. But overall, it's been a fantastic experience. And I never dreamed that we would be so accepted in Niles, Michigan. When it first came up as a computer match for skill sets, I thought, oh, Niles, I don't really think I even want to consider that. And I bypassed them. And then they called me and I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just talk to them and get a practice interview. And found us shortly into that process that this was really an opening and affirming congregation who was very supportive of my husband and I had we chose to come here. And it went pretty rapidly once we started the discussions. And it's been a great experience overall the entire time that we're here. The congregation has been extremely welcoming. We started some new services. My first year here, I said, I'm going to just observe. And once January hit, I thought, okay, now we need to start making some movement. And I had laid the groundwork with the session as far as opening a new LGBTQ service, a monthly service just once a month on a Sunday night. And we launched that in January, and it's been going great ever since. We have on the average about 15 people, which I think is pretty good for a new ministry that's focused on LGBTQ folks and allies. So, and many of the church members actually come and support that ministry on those Sunday nights. So it's really a nice balance and mixture between allies and people who identify in the community. So overall, it's been really good. The disappointing or the frustrating parts is there's one particular agency that I thought we could really partner with and move forward with. And I marched in with my flyer about the new service, and the person looked at the top of it and noticed that it was an LGBTQ thing and said, I can't support that. And I was like, oh, you can't support that for real? And then we had some discussion and I learned all the reasons why he couldn't support it. And I went back and reported to the session and to the deacons on what my conversation was with this person. And they said, well, we don't really feel like we can support that agency financially with their work or even with our manpower. And we'll support them through prayer. I was shocked that the congregation took a much stronger stance probably than I would have taken initially. And I was like, that affirmed what I was trying to do or what we're trying to do as a church and moving the LGBTQ issues forward in this community. And since we've started this service, we've had some people who were members of the church come back who had left. And we also have new people coming not only to the service on Sunday evenings, but to the Sunday morning services as well. So it's actually starting to integrate very well. We had one person leave when we started promoting the service on Facebook. It was okay to have the service, just don't talk about it or tell anyone. But so we've had great response, and I've been so excited and feel so welcomed in this community and have the total support. I mean, we're doing a Pride Fest booth next month at the Pride Fest in Benton Harbor. So I think that's a big thing to say for the Niles community and this particular church.
Thank you. Jen referenced Holland's model non-discrimination ordinance. Niles does not yet have a non-discrimination ordinance, nor does South Haven, although Interfaith Action is working with faith communities in South Haven. There's a draft non-discrimination ordinance that we are optimistically hoping can go before the City Council as part of a June celebration. Jim, what has it been like for you in your ministry in South Haven, and also reflecting on your historic journey as an LGBTQ priest?
Thank you, Sid. My situation's a little unique here because I came as a retired person to Southwest Michigan. And as people say to me frequently, you keep failing retirement, and I've done it again. But I've actually worked at All Saints Saugatuck. I was the interim there before Jay came, and I've worked there previously. And I was Jen Adams' assistant for a couple of years. And now I'm the interim in South Haven. I think my experience as an out gay priest was really much more interesting, as I mentioned already to Sid, before I retired than it has been since I came here. And what I mean is, I've really been through the wars in Washington, D.C. In the 1990s. And I was outed on the front page of the Washington Post. I had to leave a parish in Washington, was forced out of a parish in Washington when I came out and became partnered. So it's amazing to me, I guess, how different it is now. And I think that would be in Washington, D.C., as well as in Southwest Michigan. Since I've been here, I've experienced nothing but welcome and openness, really. And Epiphany South Haven is a great example of that. I mean, it's a parish that is committed to social justice. There are very few GLBTQ people at Epiphany South Haven. They wish there were more, but I think South Haven is not a particularly gay community. I don't know what the percentage of the number of gay people in South Haven is, frankly, but I think nothing like Saugatuck or Douglas, especially as a per capita. But I've been welcomed with open arms, and this is actually the second time that I have worked at Epiphany. I worked there in 2017 for 3 months when the former rector, Michael Ryan, a great guy, was on sabbatical.
Well, Jim, you referenced the much acclaimed LGBT resorts in our area, Douglas and Saugatuck. So
Right.
let's move there to Jay and Sal. Jay, relative newcomer, and Sal, you have a noteworthy tenure in the community. So let's start with you, Sal. What have been your experiences over the years at Douglas United Church of Christ?
Well, thank you. Yes, I became the pastor of the Douglas UCC back in 2014. Our church, however, has been an open and affirming church for more than 30 years. In fact, if you look at the list of the very first open and affirming churches in the United States, you'll see that they're in New York and Washington, D.C. and San Francisco. And then number 25 is Douglas UCC in this small little village of Southwest Michigan. We became open and affirming in 1989. As we've been talking about, Saugatuck and Douglas have long been very welcoming communities for the LGBTQ community. So in many ways, it's not an issue for me to be a gay pastor in Saugatuck and Douglas. However, it's still a struggle in many ways. We really had to fight for the ordinances. We had to fight last year even to have the rainbow flag put up at City Hall. I'm very happy to report that both Saugatuck and Douglas now have rainbow sidewalks in both downtowns. But again, it's because of the work of the people in our community and in our churches who've really kind of pushed for those things. In recent years, we have seen a very strong, wealthy, conservative, evangelical movement into our area in Saugatuck and Douglas, buying up waterfront properties and even planting a church. There's a big evangelical church in Holland that planted a church a couple of years ago in Saugatuck and said that on their website, the reason they chose Saugatuck is because they wanted to fix what was broken in the lives of the people of Saugatuck. And they wanted to tell the people in Saugatuck about the real Jesus, because they've been told lies about Jesus. And so I had to meet with the pastor and talk about how offensive that was, but they're here. And so I guess what I want to communicate is, even though we are in a very welcoming area, there's still work to be done.
Well, thank you. And we continue to work with Sal and the folks at All Saints to encourage Douglas, which has the oldest non-discrimination ordinance in our area. And because they were such a pioneer, they did not include transgender protections. And we continue to work with them to make that slight amendment to their model ordinance. Jay, you've already been referenced by Jen as having traveled with her from West Coast here to the Midwest. So what are your experiences as a relatively new priest in the Midwest?
Yeah, thanks, Sid, and thanks. I'm really thrilled to be with all of you regional colleagues. This is a really great conversation, and I'm grateful for it, the opportunity to participate in this. And Christopher, you and I share the experience of moving to a brand new place right in the height of the pandemic. I moved here just a few months before you did in the summer of 2020. So it's been a really strange experience of feeling like here but never arrived. So that there's or maybe the reverse, I've arrived but I'm still not here. I'm not sure which it is, but it is, I want to echo what Jim was saying and Jen about, it's important, I think, for us not to lose how far we've come over the last 30 or 40 years. So I entered the ordination process in the suburbs of Chicago back in the mid 1980s. And it was made really clear to me that in order to be in the ordination process, I would have to agree to remain celibate. And for some people, it actually wasn't appropriate for me to be in the ordination process at all, even if that were the case. So to go from that in the mid 1980s to be openly gay in a search process at a parish that was located in an LGBT resort town on Lake Michigan is just an amazing arc that I want to make sure we don't lose, and how important that is and how grateful I am for that. I will say, yes, Saugatuck Douglas is, of course, I mean, there's rainbows everywhere. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, it feels like, in a way, never having left the San Francisco Bay Area where I came from to move here, in a way. I would say, though, that what I've been learning is, even though there are a good number of gay couples and gay people, single people at All Saints in Saugatuck, I think it's taken for granted a bit that it's okay. And I think also there are pockets of discomfort when it's talked about more openly, or when it's referenced from the pulpit. So there's a kind of, it's the kind of tolerance, I want to use that word carefully, from the 80s and 90s that many of us may have been familiar with, where it's kind of a don't ask, don't tell posture, not for all, for sure, and not even for many, but certainly for some. And there's a sense in which it would be best if we simply didn't mention it at all for some. Now, again, that's not many, but I would say the word progressive often gets used for this area of the Michigan shoreline, this region and along Lake Michigan. But that certainly admits many different definitions of exactly what progressive means, right? And I think I won't take a lot of airtime with this right now, but I hope that I think the conversations we need to be having, I would recommend, would be around how to think and talk about the intersections with LGBT issues and other social justice concerns, so that these aren't siloed off into their own little cubby holes, or that we don't take any of the welcome for granted. I think what we're seeing in our country right now is really actually very worrisome on many fronts, and we shouldn't take any of the LGBT advances for granted in that regard. But I'm very happy to be here. I want to make sure that that is spoken loudly and clearly in that regard.
Well, Jay, you must have some clairvoyance as one of your skill sets, because I was wanting to move us towards kind of a future agenda. And I was rereading some of James Baldwin, who was a gay Black novelist and activist. And a quote from him that I found very profound, and I quote, "The sexual question and the racial question have always been intertwined, and a society must fight for justice on many fronts at once." In June, we celebrate both Pride Month and we celebrate Juneteenth. So we are looking at justice, as Baldwin encourages us to do on many fronts. So what guidance or challenge or provocation would you have for faith communities here in Southwest Michigan to be such voices of justice amidst a resurgence of anti-LGBT and critiques of critical race theory, on and on and on? Where should faith communities be bearing witness on many fronts?
Well, I just shared a James Baldwin quote in my sermon last Sunday, Sid.
And so lots of clairvoyance going on, huh?
Well, we were talking about how, we're living at such a divisive time in our country, and I think there's this mentality in many Christian churches that we're just supposed to be nice and everybody just play nice. But the Baldwin quote that I used was, he said, "We can disagree and still love one another unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and the denial of my humanity and my right to exist." Mm-hmm. And that's where I think we need to stand. Is, there's this whole idea of, I'll just love everybody. Right. But when it's rooted in people's oppression, the denial of their humanity, then I think it is our role to speak truth. And, even if our voices are shaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that. Others of you, what kind of guidance or challenge would you provide?
Your question of where should we be in our work for justice, for me, is more of a question of, is there anywhere we shouldn't be? Because I think it's something we work as hard as we can to model in our congregations, with open conversation, honest teaching, with prayers that are to motivate us into action, and thoughts that take us into places we might not have gone before in terms of awareness and what we have to learn. For me, it's just not an option whether or not the church is engaged in helping justice happen in our world. It's part of our call. It's part of what it means to follow. And like Sal said, it is part of the culture, not only in churches, but in West Michigan, the nice part. And so there's a relational dimension to that, which I appreciate. And I do believe over the long haul, so much of change has strands of relationship running through it. I also think that right now, simply speaking up as Christians matters a great deal. I want to thank Interfaith Action, by the way, for the work you have done and are doing with regard to gun control,
yes,
voting rights. All of that is so helpful to have mechanisms by which we can further coordinate and engage as a larger body. Because so many of the voices speaking what I would see in favor of those systemic realities that maintain unjust realities in our world, so many of the voices helping sustain our Christian voices. And so I think it's just really important that we are claiming our faith, being present wherever and however we can on every level, including our day-to-day interactions with our neighbors.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When I look at
Jim, Christopher, please.
Issue, I kind of agree with what Jen was saying. I think that we have to speak our truths and we have to walk our talks. And that's one of the things that people in Niles have said. We need to step up and really speak our truths and what we believe, even though there's going to be resistance, or there might be some people who don't like to listen to that. And I think the more that we live into our authentic selves, the easier it becomes. It's when we start apologizing for who we are that the issues arise and become greater than they need to be. And I would rather just hit the issues dead on, speaking my truth, rather than trying to soft shoe it around. And I went to a preaching conference last week, and one of the preachers said, enough of this fluff stuff. Say what you have to say and mean it, and say it with conviction. And I really believe that's such an important part of where we're at right now in the acceptance process, not only in the churches, but within the communities that we live in. So if we continue to speak our truths and walk our talks, life will be easier, even though we'll have those challenges in front of us.
Thank you.
I agree with all this, but a question that I have being involved in a small church is just how can a church like Epiphany South Haven really make an effective witness? I mean, Epiphany does a lot of good things, from feeding the hungry to witnessing for immigrant justice. But in terms of the GLBT issue, that's really where I am right now, of course, because that's what this conversation is about. I mean, what can we do is the question I'm asking that really can make a difference in South Haven, Michigan.
Well, a quick footnote, and had conversations with members of your vestry this morning is—
Great. I wish I'd been there. I'm sorry I wasn't.
No, that's quite all right. Reaching out to the mayor and the city manager
Great.
to say, we've waited for more than 2 years and looking at a non-discrimination
Right,
ordinance.
right.
Now's the time. So
All right.
one practical step.
No, that's good. I mean, you got to do it where you can and
Right.
grab the issues that are present. So that's great.
And Jay, a final word on this?
Final. Oh, I don't know about that. I'll talk. I mean, what everybody said. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think this. I'm pausing because now we've got this stuff in the wider culture about the dangers of critical race theory and all this stuff, that are being used by certain groups and politicians to divide us further. And of course, the irony is that many of those tools, those critical tools, were meant to create communities where diversity is more welcome, not where it's divided further.
Right.
So if we can figure out ways, I think about this all the time, how can we create spaces in our congregations where people can learn and think and talk with each other about how what that James Baldwin quote said, how is it that race and sexuality have always been intertwined? What in the world does that mean? What does race have to do with sexuality? Those are powerful questions that I know make lots of people really uncomfortable, but they also can open up horizons in our lives of faith and in Christian traditions that wouldn't be there otherwise if we didn't ask these really difficult questions. And to notice that, when we create welcoming congregations, that can be a kind of dicey word if there's a little asterisk next to the word welcome, right? That says, well, we'd really like it if you looked and acted like us, and we'd be very happy to welcome you then. But if, I think our big challenge is to figure out what an embrace of diversity really looks like and what we can learn from that. And I know that can sometimes be a challenge in our communities, but it's where I think God might be calling us to go with our welcome. That was rambly, but hopefully.
No, not at all. Well, thank you very much for that. And in fact, as we hope that small groups within our faith communities continue this conversation that you all have launched, that they will add to the dialogue 2 new tools that Interfaith Action will be presenting in June as part of our All Are Welcome initiative.
Good.
Each one of your congregations is a member of our All Are Welcome initiative, which means that you have inclusive policy statements, your own non-discrimination ordinances, so to speak. But we are wanting in June to encourage faith communities to take a next step from policy to practice, as Christopher was saying, to ensure that we're not just talking the talk, but we're also walking the walk. We'll be releasing 2 checklists. One is, how do you move from a policy commitment around LGBTQ inclusion to practical manifestations of that inclusion? And a second checklist, which is, how can you prove that you are walking the walk of being an anti-racist congregation?
Yes,
Recognizing that many congregations have done awesome work around anti-racism study and education. And now, how do we build on that study and education with pragmatic actions? So I thank the 5 of you for kind of launching this celebration of pride, and for moving us into more in-depth discussions and behavioral changes in our faith communities, as we model being inclusive communities, or as Martin Luther King would say, beloved communities. So thanks for your leadership in doing that, for your guidance as we move towards the future in being communities of justice that are pointing a way of hope for us here in Southwest Michigan, as well as for our country. Thank you for that, and happy Pride to everyone. Thanks again.
And you, Sid, thanks for the work you do.
Thanks. Good to see everyone.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.